It was the kind of Saturday afternoon that California seems to specialize in: warm sunlight slipping across neat green lawns, the air humming with clinking glasses, laughter, and the easy cadence of people who've already had their second glass of wine. Lauren had invited her usual crowd, a handful of coworkers from the law firm, a few of Eric's golf friends, and women from her fitness group chatty, sun-kissed, scented, inexpensive citrus. And me, I stayed where I always stayed. Just outside the frame of conversation, in the kitchen, I pulled a tray of shortbread cookies from the oven. The smell was soft, comforting my mother's old recipe. I arranged them gently on a white porcelain plate, wiped my hands on the apron, and walked outside with the same quiet grace I'd once practiced as a young bride. The backyard buzzed. Lauren stood in the center, cocktail in hand, laughing too loudly, performing. Her blonde bob shimmered with every exaggerated gesture. As I stepped onto the patio, I caught Eric's eye. He smiled small and polite, then looked away. Cookies. Everyone, I said, offering the tray. Some took one out of courtesy. One woman murmured a polite Then Lauren chuckled. She just kind of stays here, she said, gesturing vaguely toward me, like I was part of the furniture. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just awkward, nervous, but it landed like a slap. I stood there a second too long, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I looked down. Eric avoided my gaze. No one said a thing. No one said, "That's your mother." No one said, "That wasn't kind." I turned and went back into the house, placed the tray on the counter, and spent the rest of the evening in silence. Washing dishes no one would thank me for. Cleaning up after a party I was never really part of. If you found yourself listening to this story, maybe while making tea, or while your city slowly settles into quiet, then thank you. Thank you for being here. With Tenacity Tales. This is a space for those who've ever stood quietly at the edge of a room, or felt invisible in a place they once called home. If you're tuning in from New York or Melbourne, from your kitchen or your commute, drop a comment, just to let me know you were here. And if you'd like to keep listening, the rest of this story is waiting. A quiet little subscribe is more than enough to keep us close. She said it with a smile. That's what made it worse. Lauren waved her cocktail lazily in my direction and let the words float out like they meant nothing at all. Oh, she just sort of stays here. The women around her tittered quick, breathy laughs. The kind people give when they don't know if they're supposed to laugh or apologize. No one said anything. No one corrected her. I stood there, holding the plate of cookies. My arms suddenly heavy. The warmth from the oven had vanished. My fingers felt cold. Eric stared down at his glass. Someone reached for another cookie just to fill the silence. The music kept playing. The breeze still rustled the rosemary. But I wasn't really there anymore. I was a background fixture in my daughter's life, useful, unobtrusive, forgettable. I turned around, quietly, and walked back into the kitchen. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't drop the plate or slam a door. I just placed the tray gently on the counter and stood still. The laughter from outside trickled in through the windows like a language I no longer spoke. I spent the rest of the evening like I always did, clearing half-empty wine glasses, wiping sauce from dinner plates, rinsing forks. I dried everything until it gleamed, as if shining metal could distract from what had just happened. By the time the last guest left, the dishwasher hummed behind me. Upstairs, Lauren's heels clicked across the floor as she moved toward her bedroom. Eric passed behind me in the kitchen. "Thanks, Evelyn," he mumbled, already halfway to the hallway. Not Mom, not even mother-in-law, just Evelyn, like I was the woman who came with the house. It was just a glass, one tall, clear glass from the drying rack. knocked over in a careless moment. It hit the tile and shattered with the kind of sound that slices straight through a quiet morning. "Damn it," I whispered, bending to gather the pieces. And I didn't even hear her footsteps. "What did you do now?" Lauren's voice snapped like a whip. I looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, I just..." She raised her hand, palm out. "Stop. Just stop." Her tone wasn't impatient. It was cold, controlled, sharp. "You need to understand your place," she said. "You don't have a right to be here." I froze, still kneeling on the floor with pieces of glass in my palm. "Lauren," she took a step forward. "You think just because you're old, you're entitled to something." Her voice trembled, but not from sadness, rage. "You think cooking and wiping crumbs earns you the right to live here." "I didn't mean, I swear to God," she hissed. "If you don't get out of this house, I'll call the police." That's when I realized she wasn't bluffing. Lauren, my daughter, my only child, was serious. She would call the cops on her own mother, in a house I paid for with my life. And for a split second, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel tired. I felt awake, like something in me had snapped back into place. This wasn't just cruelty. It was erasure. I didn't answer her. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I walked right past her through the kitchen, down the steps, out into the backyard, where the rosemary still grew wild and the daisies leaned toward the morning sun. My feet were bare. The tile was cool under my heels. The air smelled like soil, mint, and something older memory. Maybe this garden, it had once been mine. Every seed in the soil, every bloom that ever opened under this sky, I had put them there. My hands, my time, my care. I used to come here after Paul died. Kneeling in the dirt gave me something to hold when grief hollowed out the house. These flowers, all these herbs, they were the last pieces of me still visible in this place. And even now, her voice reached me, sharp, clipped. I heard her inside, talking on the phone calmly, like she was ordering a pizza. "Yes, I need to report a trespasser." "Yes, she's still on the property." Still on the property. Like I was an intruder. But I wasn't the trespasser. I was the one who planted roots here, who watched sunsets from this very bench with a man who used to hum old songs under his breath. And in that moment, standing barefoot in the garden I had once called home, something inside me settled, not gently, not sweetly, but clearly, cold and clear. Lauren didn't see me as a mother anymore. I wasn't family. I wasn't elder. I was an inconvenience. But this house, this soil, this title, this history was mine. And for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to act like it. It was the spring of 1983 when we found it, the old Victorian, hunched like an old man at the end of a sleepy cul-de-sac in Northern California. The paint had faded into the color of old paper. The porch steps groaned under weight. The shutters hung crooked like they'd long given up standing tall. But Paul looked at that house like a man staring at something holy. "It's got good bones," he said, running his hand along the weathered railing. "Like us." We had been married 16 years by then. 16 years of early mornings, second-hand clothes, and grocery lists written on the backs of envelopes. 16 years of making do, patching up, holding tight. We didn't honeymoon in Europe. We spent our wedding week in a borrowed cabin upstate, eating canned chili and drinking cocoa from metal mugs. And we were happy. We were always happy. In a quiet kind of way. The kind that doesn't photograph well, but lives in the marrow. When we walked through that house the first time, it didn't smell like potential. It smelled like mildew and dust. But I remember Paul smiling at the kitchen tiles, green and yellow, a little cracked. "Doesn't scare you?" I asked. He laughed. "Hell no. It's perfect." And so we bought it. Every creaking floorboard, every chipped window. Not because it was ready, but because we were. I still remember the summer we painted the living room. Paul balanced on a stepladder in jeans that had more patch than denim, humming old country songs off-key. Lauren, just 6, danced across the drop cloth barefoot, 2 messy pigtails bouncing as she twirled. "Careful, sweetheart," Paul warned. Smiling. "Mama's gonna paint you if you keep running." There was already a smudge of green on her cheek. That house didn't just shelter us. It grew us. It held our dinners on mismatched plates, our arguments whispered at 2 a.m. behind bedroom doors, our forgivenesses, our holidays, our scraped knees, and late bills and small triumphs. And when Paul got sick years later, it held him too. We brought the bed down to the den. I remember spoon-feeding him soup, rubbing his back through the nights, praying quietly that the house would hold him just a little longer. He died one spring morning, sunlight cutting through the blinds like gold threads. I was holding his hand, and the house was silent, as if it too was grieving. After Paul passed, the house grew louder, not in sound, but in memory. The creak of the stairs felt heavier without his step. The kitchen seemed to echo his laugh long after it had stopped. There were days I'd pass the living room and swear I could hear him humming under his breath. Just out of reach. I stayed, not because it was easy, but because every corner of that house carried something of us. Our lives had settled into the wood, the plaster, the grout between tiles. It wasn't just a building. It was a time capsule. Our wedding photos still lined the hallway. The curtains I'd sewn by hand still hung slightly uneven in the den. The dent in the dining table where Lauren had dropped a bowl of cereal at 8 years old was still there. The front porch remembered every Halloween costume I ever stitched. Every birthday candle blown out too quickly. Every school morning, we rushed out the door with mismatched shoes. Grief doesn't harass a place. If anything, it magnifies it. And for 5 years after Paul's death, I lived inside that echo. I watered the garden. I cooked for one. I spoke to him out loud sometimes, as if he'd answer back through the walls. But the silence began to stretch. Loneliness is tricky like that. It doesn't scream. It seeps. Quietly, slowly, through the baseboards, under the doors, until the warmth of the house feels more like shadow than shelter. In 2011, Lauren sat me down. "You shouldn't be alone anymore," she said. "You should come live with us. It'll be better. For both of us." He hesitated. The house still smelled like Paul's aftershave. His books were still in the study. His tools still hung neatly in the garage. But sometimes, ghosts feel safer than silence. So I packed up my life, took down photos, wrapped plates in newspaper, folded decades into cardboard boxes, and handed the keys to a property manager. I told myself it was temporary, just until I felt steady again. I moved into the guest room at Lauren's house. It was clean, modern, too quiet. But I tried. I told myself, this is the next chapter. A new kind of family. A softer kind of home. I didn't know, back then, that I was already beginning to disappear. At first, it was fine. Lauren made me tea in the evenings. Eric offered to carry my boxes up the stairs. They even cleared space on the bookshelf for my novels. My old photo albums. The cookbooks with notes in Paul's handwriting. I thought maybe this is what healing looks like, not dramatic. Just warm. A daughter making space again for her mother. But slowly, the edges of that kindness began to blur. One day, I came home to find my knitting basket gone. Oh, it didn't match the living room, Lauren said lightly. Another time, the clock in my room, Paul's clock, was replaced with a sleek, digital one. I thought you'd want something more modern. She smiled, and I smiled too, though something inside me tightened. I told myself not to be difficult. I was a guest. A guest must adapt. Then came the rules. No garlic when you cook. Mom, it lingers. Try to keep the television volume low after 10. Let me know in advance if you're having any visitors. Okay, I nodded. I nodded to all of it. Because that's what we do. Don't we? When we want to stay needed, we shrink. Quietly. So we don't take up too much space. I stopped watching shows I liked. I watered the plants early. Before anyone woke up, I tiptoed when I made tea. Then one morning, Lauren said gently, "The garden pots on the patio look a bit cluttered. Maybe we can move some, But it was always me. I didn't argue. I never did. But something deep inside me shifted that day. Like a drawer quietly closing. Like a name being whispered. And then forgotten. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that comes. Not from strangers, but from someone you once held in your arms while they cried over a broken toy and called you mama. If any part of this sat quietly inside you, maybe it's because you understand how love begins to come with conditions, and how showing up becomes an inconvenience. At Tenacity Tales, we don't tell stories just to speak, we tell them so someone out there doesn't feel alone. Where are you listening from? The kitchen, a quiet drive, a sleepless night? Drop a comment, I'd love to know. And if you'd like to keep going with this story, a gentle subscribe will keep us close. And now, let's get back to this emotional story. It never came all at once. That's the thing. With quiet cruelty, it arrives slowly. With a smile, wearing the disguise of order and what's best for everyone. At first, it was little things. Mom, maybe don't cook with fish sauce. The smell lingers. Let's avoid fried foods during the week. Okay, we're trying to keep things light. Could you stay in your room after 9:00? We're building a calm evening routine. Each suggestion felt harmless on its own. Each delivered with that sweet tone people use when they're giving you boundaries they don't want to admit are ultimatums. So I obeyed. I always obeyed. I stopped cooking the dishes I loved. Stopped listening to the radio while folding laundry. Stopped opening the curtains in my room because the sunlight faded the floors. I folded towels tighter than necessary. I kept my slippers precisely by the door. I learned to move like I didn't make sound. Then it became, no guests without checking first. No music without headphones. No drying laundry outside, it makes the patio look cluttered. No. 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 And slowly, my world shrank to a single room. A guest room that felt more and more like a storage closet I was lucky to be allowed into. I was permitted to cook, to clean, to water plants, but not to decorate, not to rearrange, not to live. Lauren once told her friends, laughing, "Oh, she loves feeling useful." And I did. But that wasn't what this was. This wasn't helping. This was service. A duty. A presence so expected it became invisible. She never said thank you. She didn't need to. She had rules. And rules were louder than gratitude. It was late. The kind of late when the world is quiet enough for the smallest sounds to feel enormous. I couldn't sleep. So I tiptoed downstairs for a glass of warm milk. The house was still dim, polished, quiet in the unnatural way houses get when they've been cleaned too well. I moved slowly, careful not to creak the floorboards. As I turned the corner toward the kitchen, I heard voices. Lauren and Eric. They were in the living room. I paused, just out of sight. Not eavesdropping, just not wanting to interrupt. She's just always there. Lauren said. Her voice was low, but not sad, not guilty, just tired. She's exhausting. Eric mumbled something I couldn't catch. Lauren continued, her tone sharper now, like emotional clutter. That's what she is. I didn't breathe. My hand clutched the glass tighter. Emotional clutter. Not Mother. Not Evelyn. Just clutter. Like a dusty vase. Or an outdated lamp. I had washed her dishes that night. Folded her towels. Watered her roses, even the ones she didn't remember planting. And I was clutter. I stepped back before they saw me. The hallway felt colder now. Longer. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours. The milk forgotten. My reflection in the dark window looking too much like a ghost. But I didn't confront her. Not the next morning. Not the one after. Because silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is memory taking notes. And I was writing everything down. Dinner was beautiful. That's what made it worse. I had spent the whole day preparing roast chicken golden. Crisp. Seasoned the way Paul liked it. Green beans sautéed in garlic. Mashed potatoes whipped smooth. With a dash of nutmeg like my mother used to do. Everything from scratch. Every flavor pulled from memory. The table was set neatly white plates. Folded cloth napkins. Glasses that caught the light. Candles flickered gently. 2 of Eric's friends were over business types. Loud laughs. Shiny watches. The kind of men who spoke in percentages and drank without tasting. I stood mostly in the kitchen. Slipping in and out. Topping up water. Clearing a plate here. Placing a new dish there. It was when the chicken made its second round that one of the men chuckled. Chewing. This is incredible, he said. Who cooked this? Lauren barely paused. She laughed light. Performative. Oh God. No. Not me. She said. That's our resident freeloader's work. The air in the room froze for just one breath. Just one. Then they laughed quickly. Loudly. Like men afraid of silence. Eric didn't say anything. He looked at his napkin. I looked at no one. I smiled. Small. Measured. And I excused myself. Saying something about tea or dessert or needing more salt, I don't remember. I remember the silence in the hallway. I remember the way my feet suddenly felt so far away from my body. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed that night. Hands folded. Eyes open. Heart not broken, no. Not anymore. Because you can only break something once. After that, it just breathes deeper. She called me a freeloader. In my presence, in the house that Paul and I bought with rolled coins and bargain wood, she called me that in front of strangers. And they laughed. It was a Thursday afternoon. Quiet. Still. The kind of afternoon when sunlight rests lazily across windowsills and time moves like honey. I was folding laundry, hers. His? Mina. Even matched their socks. Old habits die hard. Lauren came in holding a folder. Sleek. Navy blue. The kind that looks important even before it's opened. She sat across from me. Crossed one leg over the other like a woman about to close a deal. Mom, she said, her voice unusually smooth. I need a favor. I looked up from a towel I had just folded. What kind of favor? She smiled, tight-lipped. Just paperwork. It's about the house. Purely administrative. Tax stuff. Equity stuff. You wouldn't have to do anything else. Just a signature. I didn't say anything. I took my time folding the last towel, smoothing it out slowly as if I were ironing air. Then I asked, quietly, what kind of paperwork? It would just be easier. She said, easier if the title was in my name. For refinancing. For applications, it's not a big deal. Nothing changes, you'd still live here. Obviously. Still live here. In my own house. I don't think that's necessary. I replied. Softly. Firmly. She blinked. Like she hadn't considered, I might say no. It's just a signature. She repeated. You wouldn't even have to leave the house. Walter could notarize it. If he's still alive. My hand stopped moving. I looked up at her. Not as my daughter, but as someone I no longer recognized. No, I said. The word hung between us like a stone dropped in water. She repeated it back. A little laugh in her voice. No. Lauren, that house is still in my name. It's the only thing your father and I built together, and I'm not giving it away. Her smile vanished. She stood up without another word and left the room. I didn't follow. And I didn't fold another towel. The call came on a Tuesday. It was the kind of call you don't expect. The kind that changes the shape of your silence. A polite voice on the other end, Mrs. Collins. We have a few questions regarding a home equity application tied to your property. We just need to verify a few things. My heart didn't race. It slowed. I sat down at the kitchen table. The one I never ate at. The one always too pristine for real use. I didn't apply for anything. I said, yes. Mom. But there's an active file here listing you as the previous owner and a new applicant as the primary. Lauren Whitmore. The name dropped like a stone in my chest. Cold. Familiar. Icy. I asked for copies. The woman on the line hesitated, then agreed, her tone shifting. As if she, too, sensed something was wrong. When the documents arrived the next morning, I sat down slowly, my hands trembling. There it was, Lauren's signature. Lauren's handwriting. Lauren's narrative. She inherited the house. She's managing her elderly mother's affairs. She's the rightful owner. And me just a note in the margins. A condition. An obstacle to be handled. I stared at the paper long enough for the ink to feel like it was burning through my fingers. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just unkindness. It was theft. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the folder down or pace the kitchen. I just stood in the doorway, papers in hand, and said, I spoke to the bank. Lauren didn't flinch. She poured herself a glass of water, as if we were talking about weather. You shouldn't be digging into things you don't understand. Mom, she said. But I did understand. Perfectly. You tried to steal this house. She leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. Then, setting the glass down, she looked at me with the same expression she used to give as a teenager when she was caught lying. But this wasn't a broken curfew. This wasn't sneaking out to a party. Look, she began. You don't work. You don't contribute. All you do is exist. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was calm, chillingly so. I take care of this house. I said quietly. I cook. I clean. You exist. She interrupted. Like wallpaper. That's what she saw me as. A fixture. Something static. Something faded. But I didn't back down. I met her eyes. I said, my name is still on the deed. Her face changed. A flicker panic. Then anger. Then something uglier. Entitlement. You think that matters? She snapped. You think that piece of paper means something? It does. I said, to you? Maybe. She hissed. But not to anyone else. You live here because I let you. And then, the final blow. No one kept you here out of love. Mom. He just felt guilty. That was the moment. Not the signature. Not the fake application. That sentence was the knife. and it landed clean. She didn't shout. Lauren rarely did. Her cruelty always wore nice shoes and spoke with clipped, measured tones. She simply stood straighter, folded her arms, tilted her chin like she was in court. Not in her own kitchen. You have 1 week to leave, she said, or I'll call the police and report you as a trespasser. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a sentence. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was afraid, but because something in me was quietly finishing, like the last page of a book being turned, slow and certain. You want me gone, I said at last. Lauren didn't blink. She just stared, as if saying it aloud made me even less real. You don't just want the house, I continued. You want everything. The space, the silence, the story. You want to erase me from it. Still nothing from her. Not even a shift in posture. She was already packing me out of her mind. You forget something, I said. I'm not the one trespassing here. I own this house. You live here because I let you. And that was the moment I saw it. The panic, the truth, the dawning realization in her eyes that I wasn't going to fold. Not this time. But she masked it. Fast. Years of being sharp had made her quick. You're being emotional, she said flatly. This is not how adults handle things. I smiled. Not because I was amused, but because it was the first time in years I felt clean. I am handling it, I said. Just not the way you expected. It was 3:12 a.m. The kind of silence that wraps the world like cotton. No footsteps. No televisions. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breath. Steady. Almost peaceful. I sat up slowly. I had rehearsed this night 100 times in my mind. Now it was just about moving through it. I opened the closet and pulled out the small suitcase I hadn't used in years. It still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Inside, I packed the essentials: a few clean blouses, 1 sweater, my worn leather wallet, Paul's death certificate, our marriage license from 1967, and the deed, the house deed, the one with my name, in ink that hadn't faded, still mine. Tucked behind that was a photo Paul in his wedding suit, grinning like a boy. Me in that off-white dress Mama helped me sew. I wrapped the frame in a scarf and slid it into the bag like something sacred. Then, I sat at my little desk, took out a piece of stationery, and wrote a note. It wasn't long. Just a few sentences. Just enough. Lauren, I don't hate you, but I'm done begging for space in a life I already paid for. I have nothing left to give. And nothing left to ask? Mom. I folded the paper, placed it under the porcelain teapot on the counter, the one she always said was too old to bother using. Then I put on my shoes, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the back door for the last time. The spring air was crisp, smelled like wet concrete and blooming jasmine. I didn't look back. Not once. I wonder where you're listening from right now, and if, like Evelyn, how you've ever packed more than just clothes. Maybe you packed silence, heartbreak, and years of not being heard. If any part of this story feels like a piece of yours, you're welcome to share it. Here at Tenacity Tales, we don't gather stories to judge. We gather them to remember. If this chapter reached you in some way, I feel free to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because in the sequel, I'm not running away. I'm reclaiming. And you might, too. Walter Brenner. He had been Paul's best friend since high school, the kind of man who never forgot birthdays and always kept a pen in his front pocket. I hadn't called him in years. We used to send Christmas cards back and forth, then sympathy notes after Paul died, and then silence, the kind that settles gently, but deeply. But when I dialed his number from that motel room, sometime around 6:40 in the morning, he picked up on the second ring. Evelyn. His voice still had the same sleep-soaked rasp. Still warm. Still solid. Everything okay? I need to talk. I said. He didn't ask why. Didn't stall with polite chit-chat. He just said, 10 a.m. My place. I'll put the kettle on. I got there early. Walter lived in a modest bungalow tucked behind a tangle of lemon trees. Bird feeders swayed gently in the breeze. The screen door creaked like memory. He opened it in a cardigan and slippers. His glasses pushed up onto his forehead. You look like hell, he said. Though, to be fair, you always did first thing in the morning. I laughed. Really laughed. The first laugh in weeks. We sat at his kitchen table. Same one he and Paul had once drunk whiskey at. Back in '88, after losing a client. Same table where Walter once taught Lauren how to shuffle cards. And now it held the deed, the tax receipts, the photocopies, and a woman who had finally had enough. She tried to take it from me. I said, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. But I'm here now. Walter looked through the papers. Quiet and methodical. Then he leaned back, folded his arms, and said, She's got no legal leg to stand on. This house is yours. Evelyn. Every inch of it. I nodded once. I want to sell it. I said, quietly, cleanly. I don't want to fight. I just want to end it. He didn't blink. Didn't ask why. Just said, All right then. Let's get to work. Jessica Tran. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 decades. But I remembered her. A quiet girl who used to sit cross-legged in the library's reading corner, waiting for her mother to finish the late shift. Eyes wide. Always reading ahead. She was a woman now. Brighter. Sharper. Same gentle steadiness. Her real estate office was a little storefront tucked between a flower shop and a dry cleaner. A lavender sign hung above the door, Jessica Tran Realty. Honest homes. Honest hands. I stepped inside. She looked up from her desk. Blinked once. And then smiled. The kind of smile that didn't need small talk. Mrs. Collins? I nodded. I need to sell a house. I said. No open house. No signs. No neighbors. Just serious buyers. Shown privately, and it needs to move fast. Jessica didn't flinch. Didn't ask why. She simply reached for a pen and said, Tell me the address. That evening, we met at the house. My house. I waited in the car while she walked the perimeter. Clipboard in hand. Taking notes. Snapping quiet photos. I didn't want to go inside. Not anymore. When she returned, she slid into the passenger seat and said, The market's hot. You'll have offers before sunset. All I need is your signature to authorize the listing. I looked at the paper. I thought maybe my hand would tremble, but it didn't. I signed. My name's steady. My decision even steadier. She glanced at it. Then back at me. You ready? She asked. I looked out at the house I had once scrubbed. Painted. Gardened. Cried in. And finally. I said, More than ever. The listing went live at 8:14 a.m. 3 clear. High-resolution photos. A simple description. Charming 3-bedroom Victorian with mature garden. Original ownership since 1983. Private viewings only. No mention of current occupants. No drama. Just facts. By 10:00 a.m. Jessica's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A tech entrepreneur from Seattle, 2 sisters from Sacramento looking to flip their first property, and a third, a woman named Diane Westfield. Jessica showed me their offers that evening in a quiet cafe. just off a busy intersection. We sat by the window, the city glowing just beyond the glass. All three are full price, she said. One's offering over. But, she paused. This one. She pointed to Diane's file. She asked if the seller was okay. She said something about the photos feeling lived in, real. She didn't want to rush. I took the papers in my hands. Diane, mid-50s, divorced, recently received a settlement, looking to start again. There was something in the way her offer was worded. Firm, clean, but there was softness in it, too. Like she understood things most people don't say out loud. She reminds me of me, I said. Jessica smiled. Then it settled, I nodded. Not because she offered more, but because she saw the story behind the walls, not just square footage. I took the pen, signed, and with one silent stroke of ink, my house began to belong to someone else. It didn't feel like a ceremony. No bouquet of roses, no champagne, no music swelling in the background, just paper, ink, a name written by a hand that no longer trembled. Jessica emailed the contract over at 6:12 p.m. I was in my new motel room by then. Curtains open, the city humming in orange light, a cup of tea mint. Of course, resting on the windowsill. I read the document 3 times. Once with my eyes, once with my memory, and once with whatever part of me had waited years to feel this free. Transfer of ownership irrevocable. Seller M. Collins. We're Diane Westfield. Effective immediately. I clicked sign. The sound was soft, a mere tap. But in my chest, it echoed like thunder. That was it. No more back doors slammed in my face. No more cold glances across the dinner table. No more whispered rules in the hallway about when I could boil tea. It was done. The house was no longer mine. But more importantly, it was no longer hers. For the first time in decades, I belonged to no one but myself. The first call came at 6:38 p.m. I watched the screen light up Lauren. I didn't pick up. The second call came at 6:41. The third, Luke Sishaluk. By 7:00. She had called 5 times. No voicemails. No messages. She didn't want to explain. She wanted control. She wanted me to answer so she could ask what I had done. How I could. Why now? What made me think I had the right? But I didn't owe her answers. Not anymore. By 9:15, she had called 11 times. I turned off the sound. Let it buzz against the nightstand like a gnat that didn't know it was already dead. At 10:04, she tried texting. Mom. What is this? You sold the house. Are you serious? Call me. Then another. This isn't funny. We live here. And finally, you're losing it. You need help. That one made me smile. Not out of malice, but because it confirmed something I had always suspected. Lauren never saw me as someone who chose. Only someone who needed permission. But tonight she was wrong. I wasn't lost. I was clearer than I'd been in years. The courier arrived at 8:30 a.m. He wore a crisp blue uniform and carried a thin envelope marked Certified, Confidential. Lauren answered the door in her robe, half awake, coffee in hand. She wasn't expecting anything. Not a letter. Certainly not this. The envelope was thick, official. Her name printed neatly on the front. Inside, 2 documents. A legal certificate of ownership transfer, notarized and irreversible. A formal tenancy termination notice 7 days to vacate the property. The sender, M. Collins. Not mom. Not mother. Just M. Collins, like a stranger with power. She probably read it twice. 3 times. Maybe more, hoping for a mistake. A missing clause. Some loophole. But there wasn't one. Everything was filed, signed, recorded at the county office. The house was no longer hers to rule, because it was never hers to begin with. By noon, Jessica texted me. She called, pretended to be the owner, tried to dispute the sale. I asked, "What did you say?" Jessica replied simply. I told her, "All documentation is verified. Miss Collins is the sole legal owner. This conversation is over." That was the moment Lauren stopped yelling. Because the law didn't care how many cupcakes she baked in that kitchen, or who she invited to her wine nights, or how many passive-aggressive rules she posted on the fridge. The law cared about one thing: who held the deed. And that was me. It was a Friday afternoon when she finally broke. The sun was too bright, the air too still, and nothing in the house felt like it belonged to her anymore. The documents had arrived. The silence from me was complete. There were no more questions to ask, only things to pack. She moved slowly. 2 expensive suitcases, the kind with smooth wheels and hard shells, designer bakes, packed with carefully folded clothes, things she thought she would carry into a future still under her control. Eric stood by the car, arms crossed, not helping, just watching. She tried to hand him a bag. He stepped back. "I'm going to my mother's," he said, voice flat. Lauren blinked. "Wait, what?" Eric didn't wait. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just shook his head, got in the car, and drove away. She stood on the curb, 2 suitcases by her side, phone in hand like a lifeline that wouldn't ring. The neighbors peeked through windows. A few whispered. One closed the blinds a little too fast. And then the final call came. To me, her voice on the voicemail cracked. Unsure. "Mom, please. This has gone too far. I messed up. I see that now. Can I just come talk to you, please?" I didn't answer. Not because I hated her, but because sometimes silence is the only honest reply. It was just past 9 p. proms. Mr. When the intercom buzzed. I had just made tea, mint and chamomile. The city shimmered beyond the window. Buildings glowing like quiet promises in the night. My new apartment smelled of wood polish and stillness, the kind of stillness that doesn't ache, only heals. I checked the monitor. Lauren. Her hair was messy. She wasn't wearing lipstick. She wasn't wearing armor either. She buzzed again. Then, slowly, she knelt down on the sidewalk right there outside the gate, like a child who had run out of ideas. For a moment, she just looked up at the camera, eyes red, lips trembling. Then she whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't move, didn't lean closer, didn't flinch. Please," she added, barely audible. "Just let me in, just for a little while. I have nowhere to go." She pressed her hands together like she used to do at 5 years old, begging for a puppy or a second cookie. Back then, it was endearing. Now, it was heartbreaking. I watched her for a long, quiet minute, and then, gently, I reached out and closed the curtain. Not with anger, not with spite, just certainty. She had shut me out of my own home. Now, I had simply returned the door. 10 minutes past midnight. The intercom buzzed again. I had just finished my tea. Mint and a little honey. Paul used to say it helped him sleep. The night air was cool, and the city lights still danced beyond the glass. But the silence was whole, like a room that no longer echoes. I checked the monitor. Lauren. Again. This time, she had a duffel bag. No suitcase. No lipstick. No pride. Her coat looked too thin for the night. Her hair was damp. She stood beneath the street lamp like a child caught in a storm. "Mom." Her voice crackled through the speaker. Please. Just until I figure things out. Just until I can stand up again. I don't have anywhere else. She shifted her weight from foot to foot, looked up, and saw me. I stepped out onto the balcony, not hidden. Not harsh. Just present. Her face lit up. For a second, she looked 5 years old again. But I didn't speak right away. I just let the quiet fall between us. Like the long river it had always been. Then softly, I said, "Don't ever think you can trick an old woman, especially not your own mother." Her eyes widened. Then, they fell. She didn't argue, didn't plead, just nodded. Once, as if she finally understood, I turned, stepped back inside, and pulled the curtain closed behind me, not to shut her out, but to close the chapter she had never thought I'd finish writing. You see, no one bathes in the same river twice, and no daughter comes to the same mother twice. After she's forgotten who that mother truly is. My new apartment is on the 24th floor. Not grand, not glossy, but clean, quiet, mine. The kind of place where the hum of the city is just a soft whisper beyond glass. The kind of place where silence doesn't feel like exile, it feels like arrival. There's a small balcony that catches the morning sun. I've planted mint in terracotta pots. Mostly mint. Paul used to love the smell. Some mornings, I crush a leaf between my fingers, hold it under my nose, and remember the way he smiled when the kitchen smelled like spring. There's a kettle now, a small one, blue and chipped, sitting on a single burner stove. It hisses every evening around the same time. That's when I wrap myself in a shawl, pour a cup of tea, and stand at the window watching the city become stars. No one yells here. No one rolls their eyes when I forget something. No one calls me a freeloader in my own home. Because here, this is my home. Fully paid for with the money from the sale. No more permission slips. No more tiptoeing. Just peace. Not the peace of escape, the peace of return. To myself. To the woman I used to be before someone decided I was too quiet to matter. Now, when the phone rings, I don't flinch. Sometimes it's Lauren. Sometimes it's just silence. Either way, I sip my tea. I breathe in the scent of mint. And I know I'm not the woman who begged. I'm the woman who remembered what she was owed and collected it. If you've ever folded the laundry in silence, cleaned the dishes no one thanked you for, watered someone else's plants and still been made to feel like an inconvenience, then maybe this story was for you. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive, or just dramatic, or lucky to be taken in, even when the roof above them was built by your hands, then maybe you know what I mean. We don't always raise our voices. Not all justice sounds like thunder. Sometimes, it sounds like a pen scratching paper. Sometimes, it sounds like a door closing softly. Sometimes, it sounds like silence that no longer apologizes for existing. I didn't tell this story to shame anyone. Not my daughter. Not even myself. I told it because too many of us go unheard. Because too many women, mothers, daughters, wives are mistaken for ghosts when they are still alive and breathing. So if you're listening now in your room, in your car, between the cracks of your own quiet life, know this. You are not alone. You were never invisible. And silence is not surrender. It's memory. It's strength. It's the voice you weren't allowed to use finally coming home. If you stayed until the end, then maybe something in this story felt familiar. Maybe it reminded you of a quiet strength you once had or still carry. If so, I'm glad you were here. Truly. If you feel like it, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from, or what part of this story stayed with you. And if you'd like to stay close, Tenacity Tales is always here, not just for stories, but for those of us who lived them. A quiet little subscribe is enough. We'll keep the kettle warm for you.